Hi everybody, it's Richard here again and welcome to another video. And today I have a very special guest, my good friend, James Griffiths. How are you, James?
Very well, thank you, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. And today we're going to look at, I think, what we would call our top 10 favorite deep cuts of the Electric Light Orchestra. Now, originally we were going to do top 10 songs, and I made a list, and it turned out to be a boring greatest hits. So we decided just to touch the LP tracks or the B-sides.
Yeah.
So, well, first of all, James, how did you get into E.L.O? Just briefly.
Well, they were just one of the bands that were in the charts when I was getting into music. And I got into the pop charts in 1978 off the back of Mull of Kintyre being at #1. So that year, there were all sorts of things in the charts, mainly sort of new wave things I got into. But it was Wild West Hero with the cowboys in the video and, you know, all the high camp stuff, you know. And musically, what it was my dad liked them because he's really into classical music and strings and orchestras and everything. So really, it was through him enjoying it that I got into E.L.O. I didn't really have any E.L.O. records until much later. My dad had them, and I would listen to them with my parents. They were a bit of a sort of parental band, really, for the first few years. And it was only in later years when Balance of Power came out, and I didn't even know E.L.O. had been around in that intervening time. I totally missed everything from Discovery through to, well, yeah, kind of really up until, you know, the late 80s. So at that point, I delved back into the catalogue and I started to pick up all the records secondhand, and just got totally lost in this sort of E.L.O. rabbit hole, really. So
Well,
yeah.
my story is quite similar. I remember E.L.O. The first E.L.O. I remember hearing is Roll Over Beethoven, believe it or not, back in '73. And I bought Telephone Line, the single, when it came out. My brother got Rockaria, not Rockaria, Rockaria, and Mr. Blue Sky. But I always remembered all the singles, but we never bought any of the albums. And I think in the mid-80s, I bought that E.L.O.'s greatest hits from about 78. But I didn't go any further. And I remember playing it one time and actually taping it because I was going to university, and I really, really liked it. And this is about 1987. So it's before the Wilburys, thank goodness. And I just started buying all their albums and I've been a fan since.
Yeah, I mean, I got really into the 80s stuff. It was the Time album. When I bought that, I picked that up from Cobb Records in Wales, and I think I must have been about 14 or 15 at the time. It just totally blew my mind, that album. For a couple of years, I really genuinely thought it was the greatest record I'd ever heard, you know. And I also really like Secret Messages too, as you'll see from my list. So to me, the early E.L.O. is really interesting, and the later period I really, really like. That middle high commercial period obviously is great, but I do find that most of that era is a bit kind of played out, really. The singles obviously were just so, you know, kind of overexposed on the radio, and there's just that sort of middle period of E.L.O. from maybe 76 through to 79, which is the period that most people kind of know, isn't it?
Yeah.
And lots of people say, I don't like E.L.O. because of the formulaic nature of the music, and it all got a bit kind of daytime radio, I suppose. I still love that stuff, but I can see why people object to it. So hopefully in this video, what we're going to do, or certainly my list, I've made so many versions of this list, but I'm trying to steer away from that kind of real high success period from 76 through to maybe, you know, 79, 1980, trying to focus on the before and after a little bit. But I mean, you know, we'll see.
Okay. I will say though, at the end of this, we're going to show our 3 favorite E.L.O. singles, correct?
Yeah, I can't show the singles because they're in a box that's wedged up on my...
All you have to do is mention them. So do you want to start off with number 10?
Yeah, okay, so I'll start with number 10, and I'll start with the album that I mentioned just now as being the one that really did blow my mind. I'm going to show a really crappy CD version of it, I'm afraid, because my albums are a bit wedged over there. So from the Time album, 1981, I'm going to go with the song 21st Century Man, which is a fairly buried song. It's on side 2. I think it's the second to last song from the end, isn't it? It's just before Hold On Tight. And this, to me, this is just an example of an absolutely sublime Jeff Lynne melody. it sounds very much like a Paul McCartney song. It's got that rich sort of melody to it. But it's interesting because he does a McCartney impression and he does a Jeff Lynne impression and he does a John Lennon impression. So the verses are very McCartney-ish. And then the chorus, he sings that chorus, though you ride on the wheels of tomorrow, that bit. He does this real sort of John Lennon kind of voice for that. I suspect it was deliberate because John had been killed the year before. And I know that E.L.O. were doing a medley at the time in their live set. They were doing a John Lennon medley. So I suspect this song is a bit of a kind of tip of the hat to the Beatles, really, the McCartney-Lennon thing. I just think it's a wonderfully rich, evocative song. It's got a fantastic guitar solo in it, one of those real kind of spine-tingling, I think it might be a slide guitar. And it's almost got a sort of Mick Ronson quality to it. It really soars and climbs up, I mean, it's drenched in production, as is the whole album. It's a real, absolutely just drenched in early 80s keyboards, but it's not generic. And in fact, I think the whole album is like that. It's not a generic 80s album. It's a really interesting, shades of Kraftwerk maybe, and some art rock. But I just love the song. I've always thought it's one of Jeff's most underrated little jewels, really. You'll never see it on a greatest hits compilation. You'll never see it on a jukebox. But it's just one of those songs I think is beautiful.
I think it works really well going into Hold On Tight as well.
Definitely.
Good choice. Right, my number 10 is going way back, and it is the song, their longest ever song, I believe, and it is from E.L.O. 2, and it's Kiyama.
Okay.
11 minutes of prog rock on a Richard McCook channel. Could you believe that? I love it. I absolutely love it. I do find it quite melodic. Yeah. It is quite heavy, and it kind of reminds me of, as if it could have come from the Moves' Looking On album. It's got that sort of dirgy, sort of grindy, scratchy cello feel to it, but there is a melody in there. And the words itself, I think it's about a soldier who killed a young girl's parents in the war, and he's trying to justify it to her. But I think it's a fantastic song. 11 minutes, and it just flies by. It's one of those long songs that doesn't feel long, and it does go off in different directions as well. And there's some guitar parts as well. The keyboards are quite high, but the scratchy cello, I do actually quite like that before it became really polished.
Yeah, and it's got a really wild violin solo in it as well, isn't it, from Wilf Gibson? Really scary, kind of high-pitched, kind of shrieking violin. I love the end part as well, where it hits this chord, doesn't it, at the end, and then goes and goes down into this, I think it's some sort of Moog synth or something. It's a classic song. I could easily have put it in my list. Interestingly, it didn't make any of the versions of my list because there were other things I wanted to focus on, but I did suspect that you might have it in there. So maybe that's why I decided to forego it. But yeah, great song.
Spot on. Right, you're number 9 now.
Okay, so this is a song, I think you will scratch your head at this one, because I don't think this is a song that many E.L.O. fans would consider to be a great Jeff Lynne track or an E.L.O. song, but it's one that just always grabbed me, and it's from the Secret Messages album. Now, I do think this is an underrated album. I do think it's flawed in the sense that the production, I think he made some maybe not the right choices with some of the sounds, some of the synths are a bit thin, and the major drawback with this album is there's not enough real drums on it. There's an awful lot of drum machine on it. It's such a shame because there are some songs where you think, oh, if only he'd used Bev Bevan on this song, it would be much better. But it has got great atmosphere to it, and there's a real sense of kind of melancholy on this album, which I've always loved. Most of the songs have it, this kind of yearning, melancholy kind of sound, kind of lonely kind of sound. And the song that does it for me on this record is the last track on the original British version of side 1, and it's Take Me On. On and On, it's called, sorry. On and on, which is a slow song. Not much happens in it. It's just very slow, very sad kind of song, but it's got this really, really tasty, sort of like Hank Marvin-y almost guitar solo, or maybe not Hank Marvin, maybe sort of Mark Knopfler style guitar, just very, very tasteful, very little incisive little guitar solo. And I just love that kind of yearning Jeff Lynne kind of sound. You know, I don't know, like I said, it's not a great song or anything, but it's one that always used to get to me, I suppose, you know, back when I was a youth.
It wouldn't be my favorite, no. It'd be my least favorite on that side, actually.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, that's
I mean, well, I nearly chose Bluebird because that's a bit more upbeat, and I do like that work thing in that
Bluebird
song.
Bluebird was on my list, and then it was the one that was just taken off at the last moment.
Yeah, yeah. I knew that you wouldn't be into that quite as much as me. It's quite bluesy, I think, and you know, you're not a fan of the blues. You know, I know that, and the guitar solo is quite bluesy. It's got a bluesy quality to it, but it's just one of those songs which, when people say to me, "Oh, I don't like E.L.O., you know, Living Thing, Telephone Line," it's one of the tracks I would play to people, and I have done in the past, you know, because it has that. It's got a real sort of bluesy musical quality to it, and maybe even little shades of Pink Floyd, even, you know, I don't know, moody.
Yeah.
So
my number 9 is from the album you just showed, and it's from Time, and it's the opener to side 2, Rain is Falling, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous ballad, gorgeous piano ballad with really nice effects of rain against the window and so forth. I guess a beautiful, beautiful melody.
was it not a single though, Richard? Was it? Are you sure that wasn't a single?
Not in the UK, it wasn't. No.
Ah, right. Okay.
I think there is a video for it, and it maybe it being released in Europe. There's another one I have that was released as a single in Europe, but this is absolutely beautiful. It should have been a single, but yet again, there was how many? 4 singles, 5 A sides actually taken from this album. So a 6th is stretching it a bit. But I think it's a beautiful song, absolutely gorgeous, and it's a lovely way to open up side 2.
Side 2 of Time took a lot longer for me to get into than side 1. Side 1 blew my head off immediately. You know, Twilight, Yours Truly, you know, etc. Side 2, when I first heard it, I thought, it's not as good as side 1. I think the songs do creep up on you a little bit more, though. They're maybe not as hooky, but they've definitely got a strong melodic sense to them. And that song is probably, apart from Hold On Tight, is probably the most melodic song on side 2.
Maybe Here's the News as well, but
yeah,
it's a little bit of a mess, that song. I think Here's the News. It's better listening to that while watching the video, I think.
Yes, it's a good video. It's a good video, that, yeah. Okay, so this next one made me laugh because this this list is, I think it's the 6th version of the list that I've tried to come up with. So there's, you know, various versions that I've been scribbling, you know, the last few days. And this song got into the list about half an hour ago. I was sat in the garden wrestling with what songs am I going to put on, what approach am I going to take, and in the end I just thought, right, I'm just going to sit down, I'm going to trick my brain, and I'm just going to really quickly write down 10 E.L.O. songs that I just have to have in my collection and that I totally love. And I immediately hit upon a song from El Dorado from 1974, and it's a song which, again, a bit like On and On, not a typical Jeff Lynne kind of song. Track 4, Laredo Tornado.
Oh, right. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, which again, it's quite a bluesy song. I love the drumming on it. It's got this real kind of steady, heavy, really simple drumming. Like it's almost like a sort of caveman. It just sort of plods, but in a real, like, oh, fantastic. And all these great vocal harmonies, brilliant bass work. But what I love about it, it's one of the many Jeff Lynne songs from this period, I think, where you can't, well, I can't anyway, I can't imagine how did he come up with this song? Like, where the hell does this idea come from? This chorus, Laredo Tornado. I can't even think how it goes after that. Adios, amigo. It's totally like, what the hell was he smoking, you know? And again, it's that thing, you know, not commercial, quite heavy.
Yeah.
Shades of, actually, isn't there a sort of clavinet on it? There's a bit of a kind of Stevie Wonder thing.
I have played that song in ages.
It's the same instrument that's on Showdown. It's that funky keyboard that you get on Stevie Wonder records. That sound really kind of funky, and again, not like you think of, you know, E.L.O. being this very sort of string laden, fairly, you know, sweet sounding thing, not like that at all. So anyway, I just, this album again, I think this one and Time, when I was kind of, you know, delving back into the history, they both totally blew my mind. And this album in particular was very important to me because it was the last one I found. I'd bought all of them, I bought all the records, and this one I searched for, couldn't find it. Eventually I got it on cassette, and I can still remember playing it in the car for the first time, side one, and just hearing that run of tracks, you know, Eldorado Overture, Can't Get Out of My Head, Boy Blue, Laredo Tornado, and then Poor Boy the Greenwood, just all in quick succession. Just what a fantastic side of music, you know.
It's a very good album. I think it's really enhanced with all the little almost interludes of the strings, especially Boy Blue. If you actually break Boy Blue down, it's just a standard song. But with the intro of the classical piece, it just really does elevate it. I think my number 8, however, is pure pop. Okay. And I mean the catchiest, fluffiest song he's ever written, but I love it. And it's not Twilight, it's the B-side of Twilight, Julie Don't Live Here. I love this song. And whenever I play it and I start singing it, I end up half singing Cliff Richard's Carrie. You know, Julie Don't Live Here Anymore. And then I start, she's got a room on the second floor, which is actually Carrie. But it's really catchy, acoustic. And whenever I bought the single, I actually played the B-side more than I did the A-side. Because Twilight for me has to have the prologue in front of it. It just doesn't sound right without the prologue. Yeah. I always love that song, so it gets in.
Well, I'm sort of gutted because I'm not kidding, Richard. That song has been on every version of my list apart from my last version. Yeah. I totally love it as well. I just couldn't get it on because of some of the songs I wanted to get on. I always thought maybe it was lacking something. It's lacking a middle eight or something. It's just verse, chorus, verse, chorus. It's like it needs something else, but it is fantastic. I first heard it on this. This is the third disc in the Afterglow box set. And I'd say this, if the house was burning down, this is the one E.L.O. record or CD I would grab. Because back when I was a student, this had been back in about 1990, I had a cassette of this and I played it in my car incessantly for about a year. So you've got Julie Don't Live Here, you know, Buildings Have Eyes, just a fantastic little wedge of just rare, unknown stuff, B-sides and lost tracks. So I sort of wish I'd included it, but I did suspect that you were going to include it. So,
you know, me too.
Good stuff. All right, so I'm now going to go pop and quite commercial as well, but not as commercial as that. Okay. I'm going to go to, let me just make sure I get this right. Yeah, I'm going to go for my number 7, I'm going to go to the Face the Music album, which was their breakthrough pop album, really, from 1975. And it's just one of those, how would you describe it? Kind of sugared, sweet, syrup, overload, pop, glorious songs. And it's Waterfall.
Waterfall, yeah.
The second song on side 1. And to me, it sounds like some of the stuff that's on Out of the Blue. It's almost like it could almost have been part of the Concerto for a Rainy Day. He kind of does a little, like a preview. It's like, this is where the band's going to go now. Really strong, sort of hook based, but it's not sort of hook based as in, it's not like Living Thing. It doesn't have a kind of, you know, catchy snap along chorus, but it's just so beautiful. The tune, I mean, again, it's Paul McCartney, isn't it? It's just got that totally melodic McCartney sound to it. Very, very accomplished, just wonderful chord progressions, and the sound of it's very rich sounding. And yeah, I just think it's a fantastic. It's a deep cut.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, just a fantastic song.
I prefer side 2 of Face the Music to side 1.
Okay.
So I do. I can never see the attraction of Fire on High, and apparently it gets in the top 5 of everybody's list, and it's just never done it for me. Waterfall's decent. Evil Woman, I think, is a really good single, but side 2 for me is something a little bit special.
Well, I nearly included Down Hometown. That was on my list for a little while, but I decided in the end not to put it in. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay.
I should stress my list could be something completely different if we did this video tomorrow.
Oh, Same here, same here.
So
Here
yeah.
will definitely be in it. And this is my number 7, and it's from Al Sapar. And this could have been sung by any soul singer in the mid-80s, and it would have been a huge hit. And it's a song Without Someone. I absolutely love it. It's just beautiful. The almost breathy backing vocals, gorgeous, slow tempo, and it is from the time. It sounds like 1986. It's got 1986 like guitar pick on it. It's just beautiful, beautiful song, and I don't understand why this wasn't a single ahead of the more standard and almost boring Getting to the Point. I think this would have done very well, and it would definitely have done if it hadn't had E.L.O. written on it, because by that time E.L.O. were just not hit at all. But it's a beautiful, beautiful song, and I guess my number 7.
Yeah, I think that one is one of 2 songs on that record where he was trying to do the big O, really. He was trying to do Roy Orbison, wasn't he? That one and Endless Lies.
Endless Lies especially is really a Roy Orbison song.
Okay, well, my next one is my only choice from the band's most famous album. Now, back in the day, the Concerto for a Rainy Day, I still think is Jeff's absolute crowning achievement. And I could easily have had Big Wheels, Summer and Lightning, and Mr. Blue Sky if we've been having singles. But in my view, those songs have to be heard in context. They have to be heard as part of the concerto. If you hear them on their own, they're good, but they don't have the immediacy. Now, this is the one that surprised me most of all. It's always a song I loved, but when I played it the other night, I was literally getting, that thing where you get this kind of warm glow up your spine. It's like a kind of endorphin rush. And it's the song Sweet is the Night.
Oh, I love it. Yes.
The first track on side 4. Now, what I think is genius about this song is that you get the Concerto for a Rainy Day. So you get Standing in the Rain, Big Wheels, Summer and Lightning, and Mr. Blue Sky at the end of side 3. What a momentous, I mean, most artists would have put that on the end of side 4 and had it as the climax of the album. But Jeff Lynne puts it on the end of side 3, which leaves you wondering, what the bloody hell is he going to do on side 4? So you turn the record over and the first song that comes out, first track on side 4 is one of the best songs on the album. And you're like, how many more great songs has this guy got up his sleeve, And this, it's just so kind of soulful and feel good, and it's just, I love the way that him and Kelly Groucutt split the vocals between them. They sort of take it in turns, and it's a sugar rush, but it's not one of his more sugar sweet ones. It does have an almost sort of Philly soul kind of quality to it, and it's one of the songs that I would play to somebody. This constant thing that you get from people saying, oh, Jeff Lynne was soulless, it was soulless pop, fluff, whatever. The lyrics in that track and just the emotion he pours into the lyric, everything is all right, he sings, isn't he, at the end? It's just absolutely fantastic. So when I played that the other night, I just thought that's going to have to be in the list. And I must confess, for 2 days, it was number 1 in my list.
Right.
Because I enjoyed it so much. I was like, my God, what a great song.
All right. Number 6, I have, as the song we talked about. It's from El Dorado, and it was a single in Europe. And it's Poor Boy, the Greenwood. And this is actually the B-side of Telephone Line. And that's where I first heard it. And to me, it should have been the single here, because it's very, very melodic. It's very catchy. It's quick. It's not a dirgy song. It's full of life and loads of instruments, loads of strings.
Yeah.
It's completely chock-a-block, but it's not cluttered.
Yeah.
And I think it's great, and it's a great way to finish side 1 of this album. It's a very short song, it's only about 2.5 minutes long as well. So I guess
when I had the cassette of this record, and it did that thing where it faded the song out at the end of side 1. So you had to then turn the tape over, and then it faded in the start of side 2. So that's how I heard it for years. Yeah, I like the way that on that album, he doesn't just use strings, he uses all these other instruments, brass and French horns and everything, which is sort of what the original idea of the band was, wasn't it? It wasn't just meant to be pop music with strings, it was meant to be, all sorts of instruments coming in. So, yeah, he does a great vocal on that song as well, very Bob Dylan.
Yes, he does. It's funny you mentioned about John Lennon. One of my songs coming up, I think he sounds a lot like John Lennon as well, but we'll come to that. Okay, James, you're number 5.
Right. Okay. Well, you had Julie Don't Live Here earlier, and that was a B-side. Now, I first heard that on this CD, which I showed before. This is the 3rd disc from the Afterglow box set. Now, this song, I nearly had it higher on the list, actually, because it is a song that has always kind of blown my mind. And so, yeah, it is. It is Hello, My Old Friend.
Oh, right.
Which, so slightly convoluted history. Originally, Secret Messages was going to be a double album, and Hello My Old Friend was meant to be the closing song on the album. Then there was a big thing with CBS, not sure what happened, but the album stopped being a double and went out as a single, and they chopped loads of songs out of it, including Hello My Old Friend. Now, the version of Secret Messages that went out ended, I think, on a real kind of anticlimax with that song, Rock and Roll is King, which is not a bad song, but it's very light, and it doesn't bring that album to a proper close. Hello, My Old Friend, if that had been on the original album, would have been an absolutely monumental album closer. I mean, it's very blatantly ripped off from A Day in the Life, I should say that. It's got a big string kind of thing in the middle where all these strings start to go up, you know, climbing up through all the registers. It's extremely atmospheric song. It's about Birmingham, essentially. The verses are kind of, you know, painting a picture of these kind of urban scenes of, you know, factories and tower gates and canals and everything. Wonderfully poetic kind of words. And what I love about it, it starts off with a drum machine, a really blatant drum machine, and it's all quite electronic. Then halfway through, after the string build up, it comes in with a full band. Bev Bevan at his absolute most thunderous, absolutely huge drums. And it's one of those tracks that makes you think, God, if only they'd done that on the whole album, it could have been phenomenal, you know.
That was a contender for me as well. It's
It's
very long
just,
song, actually. It's about 7 minutes long or 8 minutes long.
yeah, I mean, it was Jeff Lynne. What really stuns me about this period is that Jeff Lynne said in later years, this was the period when he'd had enough of the band, and he described himself as, you know, basically lacking inspiration during this period. He said, I had no inspiration. I didn't want to do it anymore. I was forcing it, you know. And yet he came up with this track, which is just an absolute, you know, it would have been a real kind of big thing in, you know, the band's history if it hadn't have been dumped from the album and just not even consigned to a B-side. It was just completely lost. And it's a track that more people should know about. It is ripped off A Day in the Life, to be fair. And the one thing I don't like about it quite as much as I should is the fact that it fades out at the end. I always thought he should have done A Day in the Life and had some kind of proper climax, but he sort of lets it drift, doesn't he? At the end, it kind of fades out. It's quite a good fade out, but I think it would have been good if he'd brought it to a big, huge piano chord or something, you know, some blatant Beatles rip-off, whatever, you know.
Well, I wasn't expecting that. I really wasn't.
There is another one coming a bit like that, Richard, so good up your loins for that.
If I say the Buggles, do you know what I'm going to have for my number 5?
Yeah, yours truly, 2095.
Yeah, absolutely love it. Fantastic. This is probably their most electronic song, and again, it's I don't think there's any proper instruments to this at all. Like even the voice is through a vocoder as well, but it is so catchy. And coming straight after Twilight, it's just brilliant. I love it. Yeah, great song. What do you think of this one?
Fantastic. It does have real drums on it. It's got Bev Bevan on it. That one, yeah. Twilight. In fact, all the songs on side 1, I think, have Bevan on. In fact, I think he's on most of the album. It's Secret Messages where the drum machine was mainly brought in. That was the album where
strings on it. Are they synthesized strings or are they real strings?
There's real strings on 2095. Yeah.
I thought it might be because it sounded like it. Yeah.
Yeah, but it wasn't Louis Clark though. He used somebody else. I can't remember the guy's name. He was a German arranger. And because the Louis Clark string sound had really characterized those big E.L.O. hits of the late 70s. And I think he was probably I think he was tired of the strings, actually. Didn't want to do strings anymore. So he kind of dumped half the band, didn't he? He dumped the cellist, he dumped the violinist, and he didn't use Louis Clark again, I think, until Secret Messages. He used him on a couple of songs on that record. But yeah, great track. I mean, it's a clear, you know, like you say, it's a Buggles
It is. It sounds like Video Kills Radio Star.
Pastiche. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I decided to put these two together. I was going to split them up, but I thought I'd just get them both out of the way at once. And very similar. We're going to go, well, I say we'll go back to this, but this track actually did actually emerge on one of the versions of Secret Messages that came out, whether it was the US version. It's a bit confusing. It wasn't on the original vinyl record that I bought, which I think was an original 83, British pressing, but it's Time After Time.
Yeah, that's great as well.
Which again, a bit like Hello My Old Friend, is this production masterpiece. I mean, it's full of samples. It's almost like a kind of Art of Noise track. It's got all kind of little kind of sample hand claps on it, and a real sort of complex tapestry of sounds going on. But it's just a fantastic song. He manages to, I think it's meant to be a sort of apocalyptic song, isn't it? There's like, you can hear all these sort of ticking clocks, and it's like there's some sort of countdown happening, and then at the end you hear this huge H-bomb going off.
Yes, very true. Very true.
Yeah. It's definitely a sort of, it's meant to evoke some sort of apocalypse. I always thought, again, it would have been perfect on the album because it's got this kind of urban, it's almost like a huge light in the sky, a bit like, like a big mushroom cloud happening there. I always thought this record was meant to have some sort of apocalyptic or post-apocalyptic theme to it, not kind of all the way through, but, in places. And Time After Time is just an apocalyptic track. It just ends with a massive, huge explosion. And it's very eerie. You can hear those. Is it on that one, or is it on Hello My Old Friend, where you hear the children singing? It's like really creepy kids singing in a nursery rhyme. Yeah. I mean, the two tracks are bedfellows, really. They're both the same kind of thing. It's Jeff Lynne on his own in the studio, messing around with samples and stitching together something which is actually quite ahead of its time and quite, quite experimental, I guess.
I think Time After Time was on the cassette version, the original album. I think. Okay. Because I remember reading that somewhere. That was the days in the early 80s when cassettes often got an extra track.
Yeah, yeah. Again, why on earth it was left off, because I think, again, it would have just made that album so much better.
Okay. Right, my number 3 is from the magnum opus. That's that, and it is Summer and Lightning. Mm-hmm. I know the whole Concerto for a Rainy Day side 3 should be pulled together, but I am doing that for one of my choices, by the way, James. I am going to cheat.
Okay.
But yeah, it's the acoustic sound of this I really do like, and I also like the feeling. It's almost like you've got that lost that loving feeling, the way it goes doom 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 doom.
Yeah,
this does it as well, but it beefs it up. And again, it's just so you can sing along to this. It could go on for about 8 minutes and I would still love every bit of it. It's just a fantastic song. And then you go into Mr. Blue Sky, which is fantastic. So that's my number 4.
Yeah, back when I was in my sort of early 20s, for a while, that was my favorite E.L.O. song. In fact, for quite a long time it was. And I think because it comes after Big Wheels, which is astonishing. And Summer and Lightning is a more straightforward song. It's like a kind of love song, really, isn't it? And but like you say, it's got that tremendous middle section, that den den diddle den. It's just fantastic, and it's very windswept. It always used to make me think of Jeff Lynne, kind of standing in the rain, basically, with the lightning crashing around him and rain coming down. Yeah. It's got that kind of almost sort of operatic quality to it, hasn't it?
Absolutely brilliant.
Fantastic. Yeah. If I'd allowed myself to have the concerto, it would have been at number 1. That's
fine. That's fine. Yeah. But I will show my what I call my medley, and I'll pick out my favorite part of it.
Well, that's good timing you saying that, because I'm about to get into that now. So I'm on number 3, aren't I?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go to On the Third Day.
All right.
Now, I listened to this the other night, and I decided I wasn't going to go with the whole of side 1 as a thing. Mm-hmm. I made a pact with myself that I would pick, if I could, I would pick one song from that side and have it in my list. Mm-hmm. And the one I went for in the end, I think, is the most sort of experimental or the most mind-blowing song on the side. And it's the final song, New World Rising, mm-hmm. which is very heavy. It's got real sort of heavy I presume it's like a Mellotron or a Moog or something. It's this really
some sort of synth there, yeah.
Yeah, like dirty sounding, almost sort of primitive sounding, grinding thing, and it blends so well with the cellos.
Yeah.
But I just love the verses. It's almost like a sort of kink song. I love that bit where you hear, do you hear something like a bicycle bell or something? It's like somebody waking up in the morning and you can hear somebody going, good morning. And there's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's very sort of kinksy, but it keeps going into this really heavy sort of soaring cello, this do, and then it starts doing this incredible build up, you know, that it's like bloody hell. And what I totally love about it is that at the end it goes back into a reprise of Ocean Breakup, dun diddle diddle dun. And then it ends with these sort of big stabs, a bit like in Psycho. It's like, dun, dun. You just listen to it and you're going, bloody hell, this music is really ahead of its time. There was nobody else, I don't think, doing anything like that at the time.
That whole album I sort of equate to, I know you may laugh here, Simon and Garfunkel's Bookends.
Yeah.
Side one is like a full concept, and side two is a few songs thrown together.
Yeah.
That's the way I see it. But okay, my number three. That was your number three, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Okay, my number three is from a New World Record, and it's the opener, Tightrope. Now, this to me is status quo on steroids.
Yeah.
Because if you break down this song, you take away all the orchestration, it's really just a boogie number. That's all it is. Quite similar to status quo. But it really works so well, and what an opener. And the little electric lead guitar parts, there's only a couple of notes in it, but they're so effective. You know, it's an absolutely brilliant opener, and yeah, it's always been one of my favorite songs. So,
are you aware that Francis Rossi is a huge E.L.O. fan, always was?
I didn't know that, no.
Yeah, he is. He's a huge fan of Jeff Lynne. And it sort of reminds me of Rockpile as well, a little bit.
It does. It is a boogie number, but because there's so much orchestration in it, you think it's this huge, big, grand affair, but it's not. It's just an ordinary rock song with a lot thrown onto it.
Is that your number two?
That's my number three.
Ah, right. Well, my number two, would you believe, is Tightrope.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
Because I'm one step ahead of you.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Now I did agonize about this because I've always loved Shangri-La on this album.
Yes.
The closing song, particularly because of the reprise at the end, or that big sort of epilogue at the end. You know, that I will return to Shangri-La with this big long reverb on it, which just sort of, you know, takes him off into the distance. But I figured I've got Sweet as the Night in there as the sort of typical late 1970s, because Shangri-La, again, it's that kind of sugar sweet thing, isn't it? It's got a bit of marzipan in it, a bit of musical marzipan. So I thought I would go for Tightrope. I'm struck by what Dhani Harrison said, you know, George Harrison's son, when he did the speech, when E.L.O. were being inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Dhani Harrison gave a little speech, and he talked about hearing Tightrope back in the day when he was a kid, and asking his dad, are you really allowed to start albums like that? You know, as in, what on earth was that? You know, there's a huge like gong crash, isn't there? And then and then all these sort of high strings come in. And you're thinking, what the bloody hell is this going, you know? And you're completely right. It's so funny because then it goes out into this sort of, you know, mid-tempo kind of status quo like song. And but it's very catchy, and I love the piano at the end. That's really stately, beautiful piano thing at the end. There's a great clip of them doing that at Wembley in 1978 on the Spaceship Tour, and there's a great bit of Richard Tangley playing that piano at the end of that song, and there's like a cigarette burning in an ashtray just on the piano, and you can see his hands playing the piano with all this kind of smoke around him, and it's like, yeah, absolutely perfect, you know, kind of smoky kind of piano thing. Fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, excellent choice. Excellent choice. My number two, however, coming from the big album again, I have two from this.
Okay.
Stepping Out.
Mm.
I think it's just a magnificent track. I love the melody of the chorus whenever he's singing, I'm stepping out, I'm moving on, I'm going to see the world like a rolling
Yeah.
stone. It's just magnificent. It's just a beautifully melodic song. And then at the end, whenever it's stepping out, stepping out, stepping out,
Mm.
and then it comes back in again.
Yeah.
It's so good. I'm thinking, don't finish it with this stepping out, stepping out, stepping out, and then it comes back in, and it's just perfect. And it's a great way to finish side 2.
Did you see the version that Jeff Lynne and Richard Tandy did? Just the two of them. A few years ago, they did a short live concert from Jeff Lynne's house in LA. Just Jeff on guitar and singing, and Richard Tandy on grand piano.
Oh my goodness, I must check that out.
It's fantastic. Yeah, yeah. I was listening to just the other night a Moody Blues song that totally rips off Stepping Out. It's Anxious on Long Distance Voyager.
Yeah.
Yeah, the chorus is exactly the same. It's got the same chord progression, and you can definitely hear them.
I must check that.
Yeah.
But do you not think that Long Distance Voyager is very E.L.O in feel anyway, that album?
Yeah, well, this is going to get me into my number one choice now, because I think the Moodies did copy E.L.O in the 80s, because the Moodies reformed, didn't they, in about 77, was it, or 78, something like that? And I mean, they'd been a band who were very ahead of their time and had done a lot of great work really early on, like, you know, like in the 60s. And I do think, to be fair, I do think in the 70s, I think Jeff Lynne did nick a bit of Moodies. I think particularly in this album, you can definitely hear there's certain textures, certain orchestral ideas, which are, I think, are lifted almost straight from Moody Blues albums, which had come out, you know, a few years before. But I think it's swapped around in the 80s. I think the Moodies must have looked at Jeff Lynne and gone, bloody hell,
Exactly.
this guy's having all these hits. We need to try and capitalize on that. But my number one song is, I've decided to go with it, and I wanted to put a song at number one, which to me is Jeff Lynne's, apart from the concerto, which I've already said, if I'd been allowed to have that, that would have been number one. Apart from that, there is one true, astounding, epic track in the E.L.O catalogue, and that is the title song from El Dorado.
Yes, that's
which
fantastic.
I first heard it on the very first E.L.O record I ever had, or which my dad had. He had the 45, A Wild West Hero, which has El Dorado on the B-side. And but it was years later before I realized how great it was. I mean, it's just mind-boggling. I think it borrows from sort of old Hollywood musicals. It's got that strange quality, almost like it could have come from the Wizard of Oz or something. All these girl singers singing high up. And I love the sound that keeps coming in between each verse. There's this weird keyboard sound that keeps going, do, do, do. And you're thinking, what stroke of genius is that? And their catalogue is littered with all that. Just these little touches where you just go, God, that is so perfect. You know, like you were saying about the Stepping Out reprise, just when you want it to happen, it happens.
Yes.
And then on El Dorado, it builds, there's these three verses, and each time the chorus comes in, it gets bigger and bigger and more sort of operatic. It's like Queen, but not like Queen. It's more like kind of soft. It's softer than Queen. It's more orchestral. And then it goes out into this final reprise of the opening thing. I think it's based on Grieg's Piano Concerto. It's all that, duh, 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 all that stuff, you know. And then it finally ends with this just monumental chord. It just goes, duh. It's just like, bloody hell. But I think that is ripped off the Moody Blues. I've got a feeling that there's a Moody's album somewhere that ends with that kind of big astounding chord, you know. Well, it's nicked off the Beatles, isn't it? It's all nicked off Day in the Life at the end of the day.
The Beatles, I think, are their number one influence.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I couldn't, in all honesty, put anything else at number one, going with my logic, which is let's try and get some tracks together which show Jeff Lynne at his most ambitious and his most epic. And I thought, well, there's, apart from the Concerto for a Rainy Day, it's got to be El Dorado, really.
My number one, I think you know what it is. And this is where I'm cheating, but if I have to take one of them, the three songs are Bluebird is Dead, Oh No Not Susan, and New World Rising, what you've talked about. I think those three songs together, the whole side really, as you said, should be considered. But it's the little track, Oh No Not Susan, which just for me every time within this medley, Now,
Yeah.
it was also the B-side of, I think it was Mama Bell, but it doesn't work as an individual track.
Yeah.
For some reason, it just doesn't work. It's just, it doesn't fit there.
Mm.
But it's sandwiched between Bluebird and New World. It is absolutely brilliant. And this is the one I thought he sounded so much like John Lennon. Whenever I first heard this track, which was way back in the late 80s, because I'd borrowed my sister-in-law's, is it three, what's the box set, the blue box set with the three albums, 3 Light Years.
Yeah, 3 Light Years, yeah.
And I taped 3 albums. I thought, that is John Lennon, really is John. And I was playing it the other night and I thought, that sounds nothing like John Lennon. Why did I think it sounded like John Lennon? I honestly thought it was John Lennon whenever I first heard it, but it's a beautiful little song. It's only a couple of minutes long, and his vocals are great on it. And I'm going to give it to my number one. Why not? Really, it's the medley, but I'm going to give it to Oh No, Not Susan, favorite part of it.
I distinctly remember hearing that for the first time and almost doing a double take. Like going, did Jeff Lynne just sing "They Just Don't Mean a Fucking Thing"?
Yes, exactly.
And I had to go back to the lyric sheet. Like, yeah, he did. He actually sang it twice, I think. Again, it reminds me of the Kinks a little bit. It's almost like a kind of Ray Davies song from the sort of mid '60s. That kind of what's that song where he's singing about, lazing around in his house and the debt collectors come in later and everything's turned to shit,
Sunny Afternoon, yeah.
Yeah, Sunny Afternoon. It's got that quality to it. She's this bored girl just living just out in the middle of nowhere, I guess, and she's so bored. And it is a great song. Just out of interest, you mentioned the medley being those 3 songs. Do you not consider the first 2 tracks to be part of the medley? Because they all do flow together.
They do flow together, but you can separate those 3. It's a little bit like Abbey Road side 2. To me, the medley starts with Here Comes the Sun and ends with The End. But you can start off at Golden Slumbers. You can even start off at Sun King. But you can start off with Bluebird is Dead. So that's our 10 deep cuts. What are your 3 favorite E.L.O singles? And see if we match. I don't think we will here.
Well, for number 3, I'm going to show the albums because I don't have the singles to hand. I had to put Wild West Hero in the list for the simple reason that it's the first one I ever got. And I've got a very, very special memory of my mother and her mother. So my mum and her and my grandmother sort of dancing slowly around the living room, doing that kind of old people's dancing where they've got their hands together and they're just moving around slowly on a beautiful summer's afternoon where we just come back from a really nice sort of, ideal family holiday somewhere by the sea somewhere. And my dad put on the record and they were dancing to it. And it's just one of those memories that will stay with me for the rest of my life, You just can't beat that. Now, number 2 and number 1 were both songs that were on my list before we decided that we weren't going to do singles. And the first one is a song which I just think is fantastic. And it's from Time. It was a flop single. I think it was a flop anyway. And it's The Way Life's Meant to Be. So it's just incredible. I love the fact that it's got, is it a castanet? There's a castanet in it that keeps sort of... And timpani as well. There's a big sort of kettle drum, boom, boom, in it as well. It's just fantastic. It's like it's Jeff Lynne doing his Phil Spector moment. I think it's a full, big kind of '60s production. Phil Spector. I think Jeff Lynne had far more influences than he was ever given credit for. People always harp on about the Beatles, and it's true he was influenced by the Beatles. But there was Roy Orbison, there was Phil Spector, there was all kinds of things in his music. And that song is a great distillation, I think. It works really well in the context of the album because it's an album about a guy being lost in the future, isn't it? And that's the song, I think, where the concept really comes together, where he's wandering around and he can't work out where he is because his town has completely changed. He sings, as I wander around this wreck of a town where people never speak aloud, with its ivory towers and its plastic flowers. I wish I was back in 1981. It's just fantastic. What a fantastic song. So that was my number 2. And number 1, I think you'll raise your eyebrow again. And this is going back to Secret Messages. I've heard 3 songs at least off this record. Most of the others only 1. But I'm going to go with the title track, Secret Messages. It's my favorite E.L.O. single. it's so atmospheric. I love the way it starts the album with all these weird kind of noises, all this kind of strange stuff going on, and then these little drum fills come in like didum bidum bidum bum. And one of the things I've always loved about it is that, as I assume it was Bev Bevan is playing these things, just these little intro fills, you can hear him breathing, you can hear him like take a breath as he's just as he's about to play the drum, you hear him going and then he hits it and you're like, oh, it's so good, you know, the production is so good on it. I was gonna say it does need real drums on it. It's a shame because he comes in at the start with these little drum fills, but then the song starts and it's just a drum machine. You're thinking, oh God, why didn't he just play it, you know? But the song has got all these layers. It's really textured. It's a great headphone song. You can get lost in it. You can hear all these things going on. I mean, that was always Jeff Lynne's way anyway, wasn't it? It was to bury things in the mix. It was always very kind of immersive. And again, a great guitar solo on the record as well on that song.
Did you ever hear the live version from the E.L.O. live around 2015 or so?
Yeah, I'm sure I have heard that. Yeah, I have. Yeah, yeah.
I would have thought it would be difficult to do live, but he did a very good.
Well, when I saw Jeff Lynne's E.L.O. a few years ago, and actually that's in the set.
All right, there you go.
Good version.
My three, and these are my top three E.L.O. songs, not even singles. These are my all-time favorite E.L.O. songs.
Go for it.
First, The Way Life's Meant to Be.
Fantastic.
Yeah, there's a really good custom-made video for this, a black and white video on YouTube. You should check out. It's really, really good. Yeah, it's you said it all. Absolutely love it. I love the backing vocals in this. This is one of those songs way back whenever I used to come near the end. I used to lift the needle and put it halfway through the song again, just to get the backing vocals. It's that good. My number two, there's no surprises with these, and it's Sweet Talking Woman. Which I think is a almost perfect pop song with a little bit of disco in it, a tiny little bit. And my number one is probably one of the top 20 singles of anybody ever, and it's Mr. Blue Sky. Absolutely. Yeah, fantastic. So those are my three.
Yeah, I would describe Sweet Talking Woman and Mr. Blue Sky for me now as being almost completely played out.
No, they're not for me because I don't play E.L.O. that often. So
no.
It was a bit of a pleasure actually going through all this stuff for this video because I haven't played in ages. So
yeah, I'm the same really. I mean, you know, it's like McCartney, it's like Queen to an extent. There's a few, you know, there's a few bands going back into the mist of time that, in all honesty, I probably, you know, never need to hear any of them again because I've heard them so many times, you know. But no, it was really nice going back to these, and I'm so pleased that we finally done it because these lists have been driving me nuts for the last few days. So I'm going to build a big fire in the garden now. I'm going to burn them all.
Well, thoroughly enjoyed that, James.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. It was great fun doing that. Much appreciated. And I guess next stop is the Moody Blues.
Yeah, good idea. Good idea. Looking forward to that. Okay, everybody, that's it for now, and I hope to have another video quite soon. All the best now. Bye-bye.
Bye.